Dr. Veltar stood at the observation deck of his research ship, watching the blue-green planet spin slowly below. His 4 eyes tracked the swirling storms that covered almost half the world's surface. Lightning flashed constantly in the thick clouds, and his instruments showed radiation levels that would kill most known species within hours. "Sir, are you sure about this?" his assistant asked, her voice shaking through the translator. "The planetary classification system rates this world as impossible for intelligent life." Veltar's tentacles moved in what humans would later learn meant deep thought. "Look closer, Kira. See those geometric patterns in the dark areas? Those are cities. There's intelligent life down there. And somehow they're thriving." The planet Earth had been discovered 3 months ago by a routine trade scout. The first reports seemed like mistakes. A world with unstable weather, dangerous animals, poisonous plants, and deadly diseases had somehow produced a spacefaring civilization. The Galactic Confederation had seen many strange things in their 1,000 years of exploration, but nothing quite like this. Most worlds that supported intelligent life were gentle places, steady temperatures, mild weather, and peaceful animals. The Zephyrian homeworld had perfect seasons and rain that fell exactly when crops needed it. The Kethmori evolved on a world with 3 suns that kept everything warm and bright. Even the warrior species had developed on worlds where the biggest danger was occasional volcanic activity. But Earth was different. Earth was trying to kill everything that lived on it. Every single day. The gravity alone should have stopped them, Kira muttered, reading the data streams. "It's almost twice what most species can handle. And look at this atmospheric data. They breathe a gas mixture that would be toxic to 70% of known species." Veltar moved closer to the viewing screen. His ship's powerful scanners showed him details of the world below. Vast deserts where nothing could live. Frozen areas that stayed cold for months at a time. Oceans filled with salt that would kill most plants. Active volcanoes spitting fire and poison into the air. And somehow, everywhere his scanners looked, there were signs of the creatures that called themselves humans. "They've built cities in the frozen areas," he said quietly. "Look there. On that ice-covered continent. Millions of them, living where the temperature stays below freezing for most of their year." "How is that possible?" Kira asked. "They've learned to make fire, not just small fires for ceremonies like the Velnathi. Big fires, controlled fires. They burn things to create heat, and they've built their entire civilization around controlling energy." The scanners showed more impossible things. Humans had built cities next to active volcanoes. They had farms in areas that flooded every year. They had settlements in deserts, where water was so rare that other species would die in days. "Sir, we're receiving communications from the planet's surface," the ship's communication officer announced. "They know we're here." "Put it through," Veltar ordered. Static filled the bridge, then cleared into voices speaking in dozens of different languages. The universal translator worked frantically to make sense of the chaos. "Welcome to Earth," came a clear voice finally. "We've been waiting for you." Veltar felt surprise ripple through his nervous system. "Waiting for us?" "We've been watching the stars for contact for over 50 years, the human voice continued. "We know we're not alone out there. We've been hoping someone would find us." Over the following days, Veltar learned more about humanity than he had learned about most species in years of study. They were curious about everything. They asked thousands of questions about other worlds, other species, and the galaxy beyond their small solar system. But what amazed him most was how they had survived on their deadly world. Humans had been fighting for survival since they first learned to think. They had survived ice ages that lasted thousands of years. They had lived through asteroid impacts that blocked out their sun. They had fought diseases that killed millions at a time. And somehow they had always found ways to keep going. "We've had to become good at solving problems quickly," explained Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the human scientists who came aboard Veltar's ship. "When your world is constantly trying to kill you, you learn to adapt or you die." Veltar watched Dr. Chen work in his laboratory. She learned how to use Zephyrian equipment in hours, not the weeks it usually took other species. When something broke, she didn't wait for repair manuals. She took it apart, figured out how it worked, and fixed it with whatever materials were available. "This is incredible," he told the Confederation Council when he made his report. "They've developed technology in directions we never considered because they had to solve problems we never faced. They've learned to live in environments that would kill us, to heal from injuries that would be permanent for most species, and to think quickly under pressure that would break most minds." The council listened with growing concern. "Dr. Veltar," the head counselor said slowly, "are you suggesting these humans might be dangerous?" "Not dangerous," Veltar corrected. "Powerful. They have abilities we never developed because we never needed them. But right now, they're destroying themselves." The scanners had shown the truth. Humanity was on the edge of nuclear war. Their population was sick from pollution. Their climate was changing in ways that might make their world uninhabitable. They had the strength to survive anything their world could throw at them, but they were about to destroy themselves through their own conflicts. "We could save them," Veltar said quietly. "We have the technology to heal their world, to give them clean energy, to help them reach the stars safely. But if we do nothing, this remarkable species will be extinct within 100 years. The debate in the council lasted for months. Some members argued that intervention was against Confederation law. Others worried about what might happen if such a powerful species joined the galactic community. But Dr. Veltar kept presenting his research, showing them human art, human music, human stories of survival against impossible odds. "They're not just survivors," he argued. "They're problem solvers on a scale we've never seen. Every challenge their world gave them, they found a way to overcome. Every disaster that should have ended their species, they turned into a reason to become stronger." In the end, the council agreed to what they called the salvation package. They would give humanity the tools to save their world and join the galaxy. In return, humanity would share their innovations and provide military assistance when needed. It seemed like charity at the time. The humans called it a debt. Dr. Veltar should have realized then what he had really done. He hadn't just saved a species from extinction. He had introduced the galaxy to creatures who had spent millions of years learning that impossible problems always had solutions. You just had to be willing to do whatever it took to find them. Captain Zethmar of the Kethmori Empire had been bred for war across 11 generations. His bones were dense, his reflexes were fast, and his mind was trained to think in battle patterns from birth. He was part of the Crimson Guard, the most elite fighting force in the galaxy. He was also lying in a medical bay, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how a human had broken his arm in 3 places during what was supposed to be a training exercise. The human said he was sorry, his aide reported nervously. "He didn't mean to hurt you so badly. He said he was holding back." Zethmar closed his eyes and tried not to think about that. The human soldier, Sergeant Martinez, had been friendly and polite during their joint training session. He had asked questions about Kethmori fighting techniques and seemed genuinely interested in learning. Then, during a simple sparring match, Martinez had moved in a way that seemed impossible and ended the fight in seconds. "Holding back," Zethmar muttered. He was holding back. This was happening all across the galaxy. 50 years after the Confederation had saved humanity from extinction, humans were serving in support roles with other species' militaries. They were supposed to be learning from the more experienced galactic civilizations. Instead, they were quietly making everyone nervous. The problem wasn't that humans were naturally better fighters than other species. The problem was that they learned everything faster than anyone thought possible, and they never stopped adapting. Dr. Veltar, now much older but still researching, had watched this transformation with growing fascination and fear. His latest report to the Confederation Council was marked with the highest security classifications. "Humans don't just learn our techniques," he wrote. "They improve them. A human soldier will spend 1 week learning how we fight, then spend the next week figuring out how to fight us better." The examples were everywhere. Human engineers had taken Zephyrian fusion technology and made it 30% more efficient within a decade. Human doctors had combined medical knowledge from 6 different species to create treatments that worked better than anything any single species had developed. Human pilots had learned to fly ships designed for species with completely different nervous systems, then found ways to make those ships perform better than their original designers thought possible. But it was in combat that humans truly showed their nature. The Outer Rim Rebellion had started as a simple problem. Some colonies had decided they didn't want to pay taxes to the Kethmori Empire anymore. The Empire had sent their usual forces to remind the colonies why following the law was important. It should have been over in a few months. Instead, the rebellion had lasted 3 years and was getting worse. The rebels are using human advisors, reported General Kaveth to the Kethmori War Council. We think there are maybe 50 humans total working with them. But they've changed everything about how the rebels fight. The humans had looked at the rebellion and seen it not as a military problem, but as a survival problem. They had taught the rebels how to make weapons from farming equipment. They had shown them how to use the terrain of their own worlds in ways that no galactic military manual had ever considered. Most importantly, they had taught the rebels how to think like humans. They don't fight to win battles, General Kaveth continued, his voice filled with frustrated respect. They fight to make winning so expensive that we'll decide to give up. Every time we take a position, they make us pay for it with time, resources, and soldiers. Then they take it back as soon as we move to the next target. The Kethmori had been bred for glorious combat. Charge forward. Overwhelm the enemy. Win through superior force and courage. But the humans had taught the rebels something the Empire had never faced before. Patience mixed with violence. They've learned to make our strengths work against us, the general admitted. They let us charge forward, then they attack our supply lines. They let us win victories, then they make sure those victories cost more than defeats. Emperor Kavmol listened to these reports with growing anger. 50 humans are defeating the greatest military force in the galaxy? Not defeating, Your Majesty. Teaching. The rebels are still the ones doing the fighting, but they're fighting with human ideas now. Dr. Veltar had predicted this in his classified reports. Humans evolved on a world that punished rigid thinking, he had written. Every other species in the galaxy developed on worlds where learning the rules and following them kept you alive. Humans developed on a world where the rules changed constantly, and only those who could adapt survived. The revelation came during the Battle of Keftar Station. The Kethmori had finally cornered the main rebel fleet in a system with only one exit point. They had overwhelming numbers, superior weapons, and a battle plan that had worked for centuries. There was no way the rebels could escape. The rebels didn't try to escape. Instead, they turned the space station into a weapon. They used the station's gravity generators to create artificial currents in space. The surviving Kethmori admiral reported later. Our ships were pulled off course just enough that we couldn't use our numerical advantage. Then they used the mining equipment to fire asteroids at us with precise timing. But the worst part was what happened next. As the Kethmori fleet struggled to adapt to this unexpected tactic, human voices had come over the communication channels. Kethmori vessels, this is Sergeant Martinez, the voice had said calmly. You're fighting the wrong battle. Look behind you. While the Empire's main fleet was trapped in the gravity currents, a smaller rebel force had jumped in behind them and was attacking their supply ships. The Empire forces had to choose between pressing their attack and protecting their supplies. They chose to protect their supplies. The rebels escaped. How did they coordinate this? Emperor Kavmol demanded. How did they know our fleet movements? The answer came from intercepted rebel communications. The humans hadn't known the fleet movements. They had just prepared for multiple possibilities and waited to see what the Empire would do. Then they had adapted their plan in real time. They don't make battle plans the way we do, General Kaveth explained reluctantly. They make scenarios. They prepare for what might happen, not what they want to happen. Dr. Veltar read these reports in his laboratory and felt a chill run through his body. He had spent 150 years studying humanity, and he was beginning to understand what he had really unleashed on the galaxy. Other species learned skills. Humans learned principles. Other species followed tactics. Humans understood strategy. Other species fought to win. Humans fought to survive, and they had learned that sometimes survival meant making sure your enemy couldn't continue fighting. The Confederation Council called him for a private meeting. Dr. Veltar, the head counselor said carefully. We're beginning to receive reports from across the galaxy. Human advisors, human consultants, human specialists. They're everywhere now, and everywhere they go, they change things. They were supposed to be grateful, another counselor added. We saved their species. They should be serving us, learning from us. Dr. Veltar looked at the counselors and realized they still didn't understand. Counselors, he said quietly, we didn't save humanity from extinction. We just delayed their expansion into the galaxy. What do you mean? Look at the data. In 150 years, humans have gone from one dying world to thousands of thriving colonies. They've learned everything we've taught them, and improved most of it. They've solved problems we didn't even know we had. He paused, choosing his words carefully. We thought we were doing charity, but humans don't think like that. To them, everything has a cost, and every debt must be paid. They've been keeping track of what they owe us. That's good, the head counselor said. They should remember what we did for them. Dr. Veltar shook his head sadly. You don't understand. Humans don't just remember debts, they calculate interest. The first sign that something was wrong came from the edge of the galaxy, where the monitoring stations went silent one by one. Admiral Thexon of the Confederation Defense Fleet watched the tactical display with growing horror. Red marks spread across the star map like a disease, each one representing a system that had stopped responding to communications. Sir, we've lost contact with Kepler Station, reported his communications officer. That's 12 monitoring posts in the last 6 hours. Equipment failure? Admiral Thexon asked, though he already knew the answer. No, sir. The stations sent automated distress signals before they went dark. All the same message. Unknown vessels approaching. Massive energy signatures. They're not responding to. Then nothing. 3 days later, the first refugee ships began arriving at Confederation space stations. The survivors could barely speak through their translators, their voices shaking with terror. They came from dark space, whispered Captain Velna, whose trading ship had escaped from the outer colonies. Ships bigger than stations, moving in perfect formations. They didn't try to communicate. They just began. Began what? Admiral Thexon asked gently. Eating. They ate everything. The planets, the moons, the asteroids. Even the sun started to dim. By the time we escaped, the whole system was just empty. Dr. Veltar, now ancient by Zephyrian standards, was called to examine the sensor data from the refugee ships. What he saw made his tentacles curl in fear. They're not ships, he announced to the emergency council session. They're organisms. Living creatures the size of cities. But they're using technology we don't understand. Silicon-based, from what the scans show. They consume matter and convert it into more of themselves. How many? Asked the head counselor. The refugee reports suggest thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands, and they're organized. This isn't random destruction. They're moving through systems in a pattern, consuming everything efficiently. The pattern became clear over the following weeks. The entities, which the media had started calling the Devourer Swarm, moved through space in a coordinated wave. They stripped planets down to their cores, absorbed entire asteroid belts, and somehow used the consumed matter to build more of their kind. Worse, they seemed to be heading directly for the most populated systems in the galaxy. They'll reach the core worlds within 2 years at their current speed, Dr. Veltar reported. We need to evacuate 15 billion people from 12 different species. We need to fight them, declared Emperor Kavmol of the Kethmori Empire. The Crimson Guard has never retreated from any enemy. With respect, Your Majesty, Admiral Thexon said carefully. We tried that. The Third Battle Fleet engaged a small group of them at Proxima Station. The fleet lasted 17 minutes. The recordings from Proxima Station were classified at the highest levels, but Dr. Veltar had seen them. The Kethmori ships had fought bravely and efficiently. Their weapons had damaged the Devourer entities, had even destroyed some of them. But for every entity destroyed, 2 more had appeared from the wreckage of consumed ships. They learn from every battle, Dr. Veltar explained to the emergency council. Each time we fight them, they adapt their defenses. Our weapons become less effective. Their weapons become more powerful. Then what do you suggest? Demanded Trade Minister Zekval of the Zephyrian Consortium. Should we just surrender our entire civilization? I suggest we invoke Article 7 of the Terran Accord, said a quiet voice from the back of the chamber. All eyes turned to Admiral Sarah Chen, humanity's representative to the Confederation Defense Council. She was old by human standards, her hair gray and her face lined, but her eyes were sharp and calculating. Article 7? Emperor Kavmol laughed bitterly. The Military Assistance Clause? Admiral Chen, with respect, we need solutions, not more soldiers to throw into the grinder. Admiral Chen stood slowly and walked to the central display. She touched the controls, and the tactical map zoomed in on Earth's solar system. Your Majesty, members of the Council, with respect, you don't understand what you're asking for, she said calmly. Article 7 doesn't just call for military assistance. It calls for all necessary military assistance in times of existential threat to galactic civilization. What's your point? Trade Minister Zekval asked impatiently. My point is that humanity has been preparing for this exact scenario for 800 years. Admiral Chen touched more controls. The display changed to show data streams from human colonies across the galaxy. Every human world has been designated a fortress world since we joined the Confederation. Every human colony has underground cities that can survive planet-wide destruction. Every human ship has been designed with one question in mind. What would we do if something tried to make our species extinct? The council members looked at the data with growing surprise. Hidden manufacturing facilities, weapon systems that didn't appear on any Confederation records, technologies that had been developed in secret for centuries. You've been building a secret military? Emperor Kavmol demanded. No, Your Majesty. We've been building a survival network. Because that's what humans do. We prepare for the worst possible situation, and then we prepare for something even worse than that. Dr. Veltar felt his old fear returning. Admiral Chen, what are you saying? I'm saying that the Terran Federation is prepared to take full responsibility for dealing with the Devourer swarm. But if we do this, we do it our way. She touched the display again, and new data appeared. Resource allocation charts, population movement plans, and tactical projections that made the council members lean forward in their seats. We've been studying the swarm for 6 months, Admiral Chen continued. We've identified their weaknesses, their patterns, and their limitations. We know how to stop them. How? Admiral Thexon asked quietly. By thinking like humans instead of thinking like galactic citizens. The swarm is strong because they're unified, because they communicate perfectly across vast distances, because they adapt quickly to new threats. Admiral Chen smiled, and Dr. Veltar suddenly felt very afraid. But they evolved in empty space. They've never faced an enemy that was bred by a death world. They don't know how to fight something that's willing to lose everything to win. Emperor Kavmol stood up, his warrior pride taking over. Admiral Chen, the Keth Mori Empire has been fighting wars for... With respect, Your Majesty, Admiral Chen interrupted. You've been fighting wars where you expected to survive them. Humans have been fighting wars against extinction for millions of years. We're very good at it. The council chamber fell silent. What do you need? Asked the head counselor finally. Admiral Chen looked around the room, meeting each member's eyes in turn. Complete authority over all military resources in the galaxy. Access to every star system, every manufacturing facility, every ship. And most importantly, we need you to stay out of our way. That's impossible, Trade Minister Zekval protested. You're asking us to turn over control of our entire civilization to one species. No, Admiral Chen said quietly. I'm asking you to turn over control of your military to the only species in the galaxy that has experienced surviving impossible odds. Dr. Veltar found himself speaking before he realized he was going to give it to them. What? Emperor Kavmol turned to stare at him. Give them what they're asking for, Dr. Veltar repeated, his voice growing stronger. I've studied humanity for over 200 years. When they say they can solve a problem, they usually can. But they solve it in ways that nobody else would think of. He paused, looking around the chamber. And when humans say they're willing to sacrifice everything to save something they care about, they mean everything. Admiral Chen nodded slowly. The debt will be repaid in full. But understand this. When we're done, everything changes. Humanity will not be a protectorate species anymore. What do you mean? Asked the head counselor. I mean that after we save the galaxy, the Terran Accord is dissolved. Permanently. The council members looked at each other nervously. Dr. Veltar felt the last pieces of a puzzle he'd been working on for centuries finally falling into place. You're not doing this as our allies, he said quietly. You're doing this as payment for a debt. Admiral Chen smiled. Dr. Veltar, you saved our species 800 years ago. We've been calculating the interest on that debt ever since. And now the bill is due. The human war plan was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Most species fought battles in space the same way they had fought battles on their homeworlds for thousands of years. Form up your forces, advance toward the enemy, engage in direct combat until one side wins. It was honorable, it was traditional, and it usually worked. But humans had learned warfare on a planet that killed anything that followed predictable patterns. Admiral Chen stood in the command center of Terra Station, watching displays that showed ship movements across half the galaxy. Around her, human officers worked quietly and efficiently, coordinating actions that spanned dozens of star systems. Ghost Fleet 7 has reached position, reported Commander Williams. They're ready to begin Phase 1. Admiral Chen nodded. All fleets, this is Terra Command. Operation Deathworld is now active. Remember, we get exactly one chance at this. Across the galaxy, the largest military operation in known history began. But to outside observers, it looked like humanity had gone insane. Instead of forming up their ships into battle fleets, humans scattered them into thousands of small groups. Instead of moving toward the devourer swarm, most human ships moved away from them. Instead of preparing for glorious battle, human forces seemed to be running away. What are they doing? Emperor Kavmol demanded from his observation post. Their ships are fleeing in all directions. Dr. Veltar, monitoring the human communications from his research vessel, felt a chill of recognition. They're not fleeing, Your Majesty. They're positioning. For what? For something we've never tried before. The key to humanity's plan was something the galaxy had overlooked for centuries. The quantum communication networks that allowed instant communication across vast distances. Every major species used quantum entanglement to coordinate their fleets. It was faster than light travel. It was perfectly secure. And it allowed commanders to maintain contact with their forces across entire star systems. The Devourer swarm used it too. But they used it better than anyone else. Their hive mind structure depended on quantum communication to coordinate the actions of millions of individual organisms spread across hundreds of light years. The swarm isn't just using quantum communication, explained Dr. Sarah Martinez, humanity's leading expert on alien technology, during the final briefing before the operation began. They are quantum communication. Each organism is linked to every other organism through quantum entanglement. That's how they coordinate so perfectly, how they learn so quickly, and how they adapt to our tactics. So how do we fight something like that? Asked Admiral Vance. Dr. Martinez smiled the same way Admiral Chen had smiled in the council chambers. We don't fight it. We break it. The first phase of Operation Deathworld began at exactly 1430 Galactic Standard Time. Across the galaxy, small groups of human ships began attacking isolated devourer entities. The attacks were brief and seemingly pointless. Human forces would jump in, fire a few shots, and jump out before the swarm could respond effectively. They're not doing any real damage, observed General Kaveth, watching the tactical displays. They're just annoying them. But Dr. Veltar was watching the quantum signature readings, and he began to understand what was really happening. They're not trying to destroy them. They're mapping them. Each human attack was designed to trigger responses from the devourer swarm. and each response revealed a little more about how the quantum communication network functioned. Every time a swarm entity gets attacked, it sends signals through the network to coordinate with other entities. Dr. Martinez had explained. Those signals follow specific quantum pathways. If we can map enough of those pathways, we can figure out how to break them, Admiral Chen had finished. The mapping phase took 18 hours. During that time, human ships engaged in what looked like suicidal attacks against overwhelming odds. Many ships were destroyed. Many human lives were lost. But by the end of 18 hours, humanity had mapped the quantum communication network of the most advanced hive mind in galactic history. Phase 2 began immediately. All ghost fleets. This is Terra Command. Admiral Chen. Broadcast on encrypted channels. Network mapping is complete. Initiating quantum cascade protocol. What happened next would be studied by military historians for centuries. Human ships didn't attack the Devourer swarm's main bodies. Instead, they targeted specific points in space that appeared to be completely empty. What are they shooting at? Emperor Kavmol asked, confused. Quantum entanglement points, Dr. Veltar whispered, finally understanding the full scope of human planning. They're shooting at the communication network itself. The weapons humanity used had never been seen before in galactic warfare. Instead of energy beams or kinetic projectiles, human ships fired devices that looked like simple metal spheres. Those are quantum disruption bombs, Dr. Martinez had explained during the briefing. We developed them from studying how radiation in Earth's magnetosphere interferes with quantum communication. Each bomb creates a localized field that severs quantum entanglement bonds. The effect was immediate and devastating. As the first quantum disruption bombs detonated in the emptiness of space, feedback waves began cascading through the Devourer swarm's communication network. Individual swarm entities, suddenly cut off from the hive mind, stopped their coordinated movements and began moving erratically. It's working, Admiral Chen said quietly, watching as red marks began disappearing from the tactical display. Phase 3. All units. Phase 3 was the most dangerous part of the operation, and it required something that only humans were willing to do. Across the galaxy, human ships loaded with quantum disruption bombs began flying directly into the heart of the largest swarm clusters. These were one-way missions. The ships would penetrate as deep as possible into the swarm formations before detonating their quantum bombs, sending devastating feedback pulses through the network. They're flying suicide missions, Emperor Kavmol said, his voice filled with disbelief. Their own people. They're ordering their own soldiers to die. No, Dr. Veltar corrected sadly. Their soldiers are volunteering. The communications from the suicide missions were broadcast in clear language so the galaxy could hear them. Terra Command, this is Ghost Fleet 12. We've reached the primary cluster. Beginning final approach. Understood, Ghost 12. You are authorized for final phase. Roger, Terra Command. It's been an honor. Tell our families we did what needed to be done. One by one, human ships penetrated the heart of swarm clusters and detonated quantum bombs that sent cascading failures through the network. With each successful mission, more swarm entities lost contact with the hive mind and became confused, uncoordinated, and vulnerable. But the cost was terrible. Hundreds of human ships, thousands of human lives. Why are they doing this? Emperor Kavmol asked. Why are they sacrificing so much? Dr. Veltar had been asking himself the same question for 800 years. Because that's what Deathworld species do, Your Majesty. They understand that sometimes survival requires sacrifice, and they're willing to pay any price to protect what they care about. The turning point came when Commander Sarah Williams, granddaughter of the original refugee from Earth, flew her ship directly into the largest swarm cluster in the galaxy. Terra Command, this is Ghost 1. I can see the primary network hub. It's beautiful, like a crystal made of light. Ghost 1. You are cleared for final approach. Make it count. Roger, Terra Command. For Earth, for the galaxy, for everyone who comes after us. The explosion that followed was visible from 3 star systems away. The quantum disruption bomb didn't just sever local entanglement bonds. It sent a feedback wave through the entire network that reached every swarm entity in the galaxy simultaneously. In the space of 30 seconds, the most dangerous threat the galaxy had ever faced went from a coordinated hive mind to millions of confused individual organisms scattered across hundreds of star systems. "The network is down," reported the communications officer, his voice filled with awe. "All quantum signatures have gone silent. The swarm has lost cohesion." Admiral Chen stood quietly for a moment, looking at the tactical display where red marks were winking out of existence across the galaxy. "All units, this is Terra Command. The primary objective has been achieved. Begin Phase 4. Cleanup operations." Phase 4 was simple by comparison. Without their hive mind coordination, individual swarm entities were powerful, but no longer impossible to fight. Combined galactic forces, led by human tactical commanders, began the long process of hunting down the scattered survivors. But Admiral Chen wasn't watching the cleanup operations. She was looking at a different display, one that showed communication channels to the Confederation Council. Terra Command to Confederation leadership. She broadcast on all frequencies. "The Devourer swarm has been neutralized. Repeat. The threat to galactic civilization has been eliminated." There was a long pause before the reply came. "Admiral Chen, this is the Confederation Council," came the voice of the head counselor. We don't know how to thank you. Humanity has saved us all." Admiral Chen looked around at her command staff, then back at the communication display. "Counselor, the debt has been repaid in full. As of this moment, the Terran Accord is dissolved. Humanity is withdrawing from protectorate status." Another long pause. "Admiral Chen, surely we can discuss." "There's nothing to discuss, Counselor. We did what we said we would do. We saved the galaxy. Now we're done being anyone's junior partner." Dr. Veltar, listening to the broadcast from his research vessel, felt the last piece of his 800-year puzzle fall into place. Humanity hadn't just saved the galaxy from the Devourer swarm. They had declared their independence from it. 6 months after the day of repayment, the galaxy was falling apart. It started with the Zephyrian Trade Consortium. For centuries, their economy had been built on trading goods and services between species. Taking a percentage of every transaction, they had become the galaxy's banking system, handling currency exchanges and financing major projects across thousands of worlds. But 30% of their most profitable trade routes ran through human space, and another 40% depended on human-made goods that were more efficient than anything other species could produce. When Admiral Chen announced that humanity was withdrawing from the Confederation, she had also announced that all existing trade agreements would be renegotiated. As independent worlds, human colonies were no longer bound by the favorable deals they had signed as a protectorate species. Trade Minister Zekval stood in his empty office, looking at reports that showed his consortium bleeding money every day. The humans weren't being unreasonable in their demands. They were just charging fair market prices for their goods and services. The problem was that the galaxy had become addicted to getting human innovation at discount rates. "Sir, we've received another communication from the Kepler Colony Consortium," his aide reported nervously. "They're demanding payment in advance for fusion reactor maintenance. They say they can't work on credit anymore." Zekval closed his eyes. Kepler Colony was one of the smallest human settlements, barely 50,000 people. But they maintained the fusion reactors for 15 different Zephyrian trade stations. Without those reactors, the stations would have to shut down. "How much are they asking?" "Standard galactic rates, sir." "Standard rates? But we've been paying them 20% below standard for the last 50 years. "Yes, sir. They say that was the protectorate rate. Now they're independent." Across the galaxy, the same conversation was happening thousands of times. Human colonies that had been providing goods and services at below-market rates to fulfill their obligations under the Terran Accord were now free to charge what their work was actually worth. The economic shockwaves reached every major power in the galaxy. The Keth Mori Empire discovered that their military expansion over the last century had been built on human tactical advice. When human military advisors began resigning from their positions and returning to human space, Keth Mori generals realized they didn't actually know how to manage their vast territories. The rebellion in the Outer Rim has started again, reported General Kav-Eth to Emperor Kav-Mol. Without human advisors, we can't coordinate our forces effectively across multiple star systems. Then hire them back, the Emperor ordered. They're not taking contracts with non-human governments anymore, Your Majesty. They say they're focusing on human defense priorities. Emperor Kav-Mol felt rage building in his chest. They can't just abandon their obligations to us. With respect, Your Majesty. They fulfilled their obligations. They saved the galaxy from the Devourer swarm. The Terran Accord is dissolved. Within 6 months, 3 separate Kethmori territories had declared independence. Without human tactical support, the Empire's forces were spread too thin to maintain control over their vast holdings. But the worst collapse happened to the Velnathi theocracy. For 500 years, the Velnathi had built their religion around the concept of divine guidance through the stars. They taught that the gods sent signs through cosmic events, and that faithful interpretation of these signs would lead to salvation. The arrival of humanity had been incorporated into their theology as a divine miracle. A species that had survived impossible odds on a death world was clearly blessed by the gods. The Confederation's decision to save humanity from extinction was seen as the gods working through mortal agents. The defeat of the Devourer swarm had been interpreted as the ultimate proof of divine favor. The gods had sent humanity to save the galaxy. Then Admiral Chen gave her final interview to Galactic Media. Admiral Chen, asked the Velnathi reporter, how do you explain humanity's miraculous victory over the swarm? Surely this was divine intervention. Admiral Chen looked directly into the camera with the expression that Dr. Veltar had learned to fear over the centuries. There was nothing miraculous about it, she said calmly. We identified the swarm's weaknesses through scientific analysis. We developed appropriate technology to exploit those weaknesses. We executed a military plan that sacrificed some of our people to save everyone else. That's not a miracle. That's just good planning and the willingness to do what needed to be done. But the odds against success were calculated in advance. We estimated a 73% chance of success with acceptable losses. Those aren't miracle odds. That's just a risky operation that happened to work. The interview was broadcast across Velnathi space, and the effect was immediate. If humanity's survival and success was based on science and determination rather than divine blessing, then what did that say about the Velnathi faith? High Priest Mortan watched his temples empty as his people struggled with the theological crisis. The humans hadn't just defeated an impossible enemy, they had done it through purely material means, without any divine assistance. Perhaps, suggested his aide carefully, the gods work through science and determination? High Priest Mortan shook his head sadly. That's not faith. That's just competence. Within a year, the Velnathi theocracy had fractured into dozens of smaller groups, each trying to rebuild their faith around new interpretations of human success. Dr. Veltar, now so old that his species' medical technology was the only thing keeping him alive, published his final research paper from his retirement home on a quiet human agricultural world. The Death World Paradox, How Salvation Became Subjugation, was read across the galaxy by shocked academic communities. For 8 centuries, he wrote, I believed I had saved humanity from extinction. I was wrong. I had preserved the very traits that would make humanity superior to the rest of the galaxy. Other species evolved on worlds that rewarded specialization. Humans evolved on a world that punished it. We became very good at specific tasks. They became good at learning new tasks. We built our civilizations on predictable foundations. They learned to thrive when foundations crumbled. We learned to fight battles. They learned to survive wars. I thought I was giving them the tools to join our galactic community. Instead, I was giving them time to understand our weaknesses. The paper's conclusion was stark. Humanity was never our equal. They were our evolutionary superior. Held back only by the limitations of their single world, by giving them access to the galaxy, we ensured our own obsolescence. But the strangest part of the new galactic order was that humans didn't seem interested in conquest. Human colonies became beacons of stability in an increasingly chaotic galaxy. When other species faced problems they couldn't solve, human engineers would arrive with solutions. When conflicts arose between species, human mediators would help negotiate peaceful resolutions. They charged fair prices for their services. They honored their agreements. They treated other species with respect and dignity. They just refused to be anyone's junior partners ever again. The final proof of this new order came 2 years after the Day of Repayment, when the Devourer Swarm's homeworld was finally located in the galactic void beyond the Outer Rim. The planet was dead, consumed by its own children millions of years ago, but the ruins held technology that could revolutionize galactic civilization. The question was, who had the right to claim it? The answer came in the form of a human terraforming fleet. "We're not claiming the ruins for humanity," announced Captain Rodriguez to the gathered representatives of dozen species. "We're restoring the world and opening it as a research facility for all galactic species to study together." "Why?" asked the Kethmori representative suspiciously. "What do you gain from this?" Captain Rodriguez looked at the group of alien representatives and smiled the same smile that Dr. Veltar had been seeing from humans for 800 years. "Knowledge," she said simply. "We want to understand how the Devourer Swarm evolved, how their technology worked, and how to prevent anything like them from emerging again. And if we learn to build their technology, then we'll all be better prepared if something like this happens again." Dr. Veltar, listening to the broadcast from his retirement home, finally understood the truth he had been missing for centuries. Humanity hadn't become the galaxy's conquerors. They had become its guardians. Not because they had been ordered to, not because they were paid to, but because protecting others was what Deathworld survivors did naturally. 800 years ago, he had saved a species from extinction. In return, that species had just spent the rest of eternity ensuring that no other species would face extinction alone. The debt, Dr. Veltar realized, had been repaid with interest, but the humans were still making payments. They always would be, because that was what they were,